You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Hello, awakening souls. Happy end of 2019. How are you feeling? For me, I'm being pulled, I think, in a couple of different directions. I'm taking the time to really cherish and honor my relationships, feeling a wonderful kinship with people around me, really just loving this quality time with them. And the other part of me is like, wow, you made a huge change this time last year, and what have you actually done, girl? As I look back over this year, though, I'm really proud. I feel like between the book and the podcast and speaking engagements and getting out there with my platform and my message more and more, I've actually accomplished quite a bit. But I also know I could do more, and I think a lot about the resistance that comes with expansion. And I'm meditating on that, and I'm reading about that. And I'm really hoping that in 2020, it's not something that I push through, but it's something that I'm gentle enough with myself in to progress into that more expanded me that is wanting to come out. So I wish the same for you. I hope that 2020 for you is a year of expansion, a year of realizing those parts of you that you've known have been there, but maybe haven't quite been ready to step into yet. So I'm really thrilled to see where this year takes us. I'm also excited for you to hear this week's episode with Joseph Imbriano. He's someone who really knows what it's like to expand into the next level of yourself and to start over, to start from zero time and time again. So I hope you'll find some inspiration and some value in this journey. And here's to a wonderful 2020 for you. Enjoy. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, Shelley, for having me.
Of course, it's my delight to have you here. I was introduced to Joseph through a mutual friend who I also happened to interview for this podcast. And he connected with Joseph and was really fascinated by his journey. And he's like, if you'd like to talk to someone about awakenings, here is someone you should talk to. And I quickly realized, like, wow, this man has stories. He's got a very rich history. And it's amazing to see, a person's awakening journey. And you can sometimes pinpoint when that was. There are many in people's lives more often than not. But I remember hearing you talk about just after college, you were very focused on wanting to get a very specific career in financial services, if I remember correctly, and it didn't happen. And so that kind of puts you on a different trajectory. Can you walk me through even before that and how you got there?
It did. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah.
So excited to talk about this. The path to spirituality is wild and wonderful, especially when we embrace it. And I've been fortunate enough to have, like you say, several challenges that have forced me to embrace it, even if I didn't want to, and that has led to just transformative things. Back then, I was 17, and I was just kicked out of the house. And so I went from a period of comfort to a period of uncertainty. And I put a chip on my shoulder to get through it. It was this hustle type of mentality. And like you said, I wanted to get to what I thought in my 17-year-old mind was the apex of success, which was being an investment banker at this particular firm. And so I worked really hard for 4 years, hustling, working several jobs, sometimes not having a place to sleep. But at the final year, I was 21. I spent an extra semester there getting a double major. So it was in August. And I got in my hand an offer by this investment banking firm, right? And it would have, in my 21-year-old mind, I had made it. I had gone from, once again, I'm trying to go back to that mind, this sort of like this, I've been abandoned at 17.
Yes.
And now they will realize that they missed me, that we tell ourselves, right? When we
Of course.
figure these things out. And I had validation externally that I hope to bring to my family and get acceptance, right? And that was the trauma that I was dealing with at that time. But But fate would have it that just a few weeks later, September 11th hit. And
Mm,
so not only did that change the shape of the world, but it, if I would have gotten that offer, the semester that I was supposed to graduate, then I probably would have been in those buildings.
wow.
I think about that often when I try to figure out like what is I'm grateful for and what
Hmm.
I'm living. But back then, I had no plan B, and the chip was only good to get so far. I had to break through the chip. I had to break through this lower level of thinking, emotional thinking, and try to find purpose. And so by October, I was depressed. By November, I don't know if they did this just for me, but McDonald's had a 79-cent triple cheeseburger sale. And I loved it. I'll be honest. I had three or four of them at a time, and I gained a lot of weight. And I just tried to bobble around. And so that was how um, that's how the path to spirituality really began at a low, low, low point, right after a high, 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 beautiful moment.
That's incredible. And it's interesting that you say, you had three or four of these triple cheeseburgers at a time. And I know when I get in that space where I want to eat like that, it's because my body is trying to be grounded. I'm trying to be grounded in this space, whereas it's there's a part of me that like just wants to escape and just says like I'm out here, I'm in the ether, I'm over there. It's so much easier to float above and not be living on the earthly plane, if you will. And so that I found as a way to like bring it to a space like if my body's occupying more space, then I must be here. Was that a feeling you resonated with or no?
So first of all, I think that's fascinating. I haven't thought of it in terms of the physical aspects of space. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll be honest, I thought of none of this until just a few years ago when I was at a point where I could go back,
Reflect.
think, and reflect. Back then, it was all an adventure. It was very depressing in that moment, but it was still a
Mm,
story to be told. Um, I think that what kept me eating, or what the purpose of constantly eating was sort of a way to ground my anger and my lack of
mm.
forgiveness for whatever I was angry at the time. I really can't put a finger on it, but I kind of felt like the world had taken something away from me. And with that feeling of abandonment, I was just not in an emotional place to do much else but eat. And so I took advantage of that.
It's comforting. I mean, it's
It
something that's
was.
tangible and it fills you up quite literally.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
It's a
so
small
then
win when you feel like you haven't had any.
that's so true. Wow, that's a really good point. So when September 11th happened, what was your next step?
Well, I had no plan B, like I said, so
Hmm.
the next step wasn't quite that simple. One thing that I learned very early on that I had, which really helped me, was resilience. And
Mm,
so I would take my hits not on the ground, I would walk still towards the goal, even if I was a little bit foggy. And so for the next 2 years, I was trying to find a place for someone who had investment banking experience, who had a very hurt ego, and with a lot of anger, try to funnel that in a way that was productive. But like I said before, resiliency has its benefits, but it also can be detrimental. And if I'm getting up and continually moving towards a purpose that wasn't thought out, right? It was meant more to get validation from family and less what I wanted to do with my life. So instead of moving forward, I was constantly tethered backwards.
I
So for
see.
2 months, I kept just beating myself against a wall that didn't break. So it wasn't until 2003 when I just had enough. I was 23 at the time. I had had enough, and I just wanted to get a sense of something. I needed some sort of validation. And so I started, one of the things that I love to do is ask questions of myself, hard ones, right? I don't like these easy questions. And so I finally was like, listen, if you just had 6 months, and your life is gone after 6 months, what would you do? And in 2 weeks, I was in China.
And why China?
Well, I'm fascinated by the idea that, so right now China has one stereotype, right? One way of looking at it, right? But back then, China was still very much framed, at least in my communities, by the Cold War,
Mm,
and more often Tiananmen Square. And I just didn't feel right with the idea that a billion people could all be that way.
mm,
And maybe it was just me trying to figure out, whether there were other people like me who I could connect with. But there was this curiosity there that there was a small, very narrow story, and yet thousands of years of history. Something didn't square there. It was perfect for my curiosity to jump
Yes.
to.
And the curiosity is I think something that's so valuable as a trait to have, because if you're not curious, you're not going to learn. You're not going to push yourself to say, I have this belief, I want to challenge this belief. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
So in doing that, what did you learn?
All of this,
All
everything
of
that I
this.
am now is because of that jump, that 2 week jump that I went to China. Um, I learned. I'm gonna make the question smaller because
Sure.
this isn't a 6 hour podcast. Uh, I learned that it's okay. It's okay to not know at the beginning, but it's not okay to continue taking steps forward towards something that you haven't questioned, right? I learned that it's okay to let your curiosity run wild, and that the skills that I acquired just trying to hustle my way through university and try to make it all work were the same skills that helped me to learn Chinese, and then to help people in tough crossroads when they couldn't handle their circumstances, and then to just do all these other things with my life. And then when challenge happened again, and I was at a point where once again life turns back to zero, I recognize that, and I can take what I learned the last time and bring it up and ask those questions again and start that process, right? I guess what I learned was me and who I am and what I want and what I don't want. And what's worth getting up every morning for? What's my purpose?
Now, what is your purpose?
Well,
Small question.
yeah, no, I know. You did say we're going to start with small questions. Well, my purpose is so right now so it's a little story before the purpose, because my purpose is to create impact at scale. What
Yes.
that means is for a long time I've been one of my superpowers is helping people in crisis, helping people at forks in the road. I can look at a room and I don't know anyone in it, but then get a sense of who is struggling with something, sit beside them in either work or business, spirituality, family, and just sort of sit there and help them work through their problems. And it was always a one to one. And
Mm-hmm.
granted, those one can go back to their community and talk to 10. But now, how do I get 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people to get unblocked and move forward? How can I create impact at scale? And so that's the purpose.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why I came to Denver.
And so that's why you moved to Denver. It's something you've been doing with your company, and this company started in China, and then you've taken it international to other places. You're focusing here in Denver right now. What does that look like practically when you're saying, "Hey, I see you have a problem, and I can help you"? Do you go searching for it? Do they find you? Is it just like a natural synergy that occurs?
I think energy finds energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think people come up to me and it also so energy finds energy, but then it's important to be open. So when the person wants to share, when the business wants to share, you're willing to create that space and hold that space for them to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
The business or the organizational level. And I have been through. I mean, that China part was just the beginning of it, right? I have been through challenges and remember what it feels like to not have anyone around, and I wouldn't want that for anyone.
Yes,
And
it's so
so,
hard.
feel someone is in that, I want to hold that space for them because the first thing they need to know is that they're not alone, even if they don't know it. My name is Joseph, and how can I help? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's that sort of framework that starts the connections, and then over time, you just meet more people, right?
And so you're a natural helper. You did a lot of aid work in Texas during their natural disaster in the past couple of years. Can you speak a little bit to that and how you got involved?
Yeah, I worked at the Department of Homeland Security as a critical infrastructure analyst. I was writing policy on things like roads, nuclear
Mm.
facilities, space policy. It was amazing stuff. All the infrastructure that the country needs, like at the minimum to survive. And then Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, which was considered the storm of the century. And then
Hmm.
even more powerful hurricane hit a few weeks later and hit Puerto Rico. And FEMA wasn't able to respond to all of it. And so they called on people in the Department of Homeland Security to help out, and I volunteered. And so in a few weeks, I went from never having done it to leading about 90 people, 17 teams spread across the state, helping thousands of survivors find ways to get insurance and financial assistance so that they can put their lives back together.
That must have been like very emotionally taxing as you're trying to complete your work. I mean, how did you reconcile that? Like being present, being positive. I'm sure you had to show up in a really great way in order to support these folks, but also not internalizing their struggle.
That's the key, right? I think that, so first it's just realizing it's not about me. That's that. At any moment I can go home and I have a home, right? So that takes care of all the internal strife. All the attention is on not the survivors, because that's not my job, but the people who take care of the survivors. So if I can help these 93 people get what they want so that they can help 10 or 50 or 100 survivors a day for 83 days,
Wow.
just do that, then survivors, tens of thousands of survivors have help, right? And so I say, first of all, it's not about me. Ego is gone. Humility.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I thrive in uncertainty. So this is my strength. Third, know my place, which is right there, not helping the survivors, but helping the people. And then just executing every day. I was working 18, 19 hours every day. I was driving around the state. I had the largest group of non-FEMA government volunteers teams in the entire state, and I had never been trained. And I
Wow.
just thrived on it, just thrived on it because I knew the purpose and I didn't need anyone to know my name. And it was funny, if I can just give a quick side note.
Of course.
I was in Colombia about 6 or 7 months later, and I went into a hostel. It was like my first day there, and there was a man there from the southern part of Texas, and his draw, and so his accent. So I picked it up. I was like, "Where are you from?" And he had received some of the assistance that my teams had given.
Just came
And
full circle.
that hit me because I wasn't expecting it, one, but it hit me more because it hit him. Like he saw
Mm.
someone that was behind the scenes helping out that person, right? And it was just so beautiful to recognize that right now there are people who are living better lives because of me choosing 4 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep or as many hours of work that it took to get there.
And it
Right?
lights you up when you do it because they are stepping into your purpose, which it is on a scale. If you think about it, you help this community who in turn helps this larger
Yeah.
community. And I call this in my book, I call it the circle of light. It's that thing that lights you up, that you're great at, that makes you happy, that you would do for free. And it comes out into the world and it meets the place that you are best equipped to serve, the way you are best meant to serve in the world. And then it comes back to you when things like this happen, you have that contact with someone who was actually affected by it, then it fuels you even more, and it just lights that fire even greater. So it's like a really sweet spot to be in when you find yourself there.
I totally agree. And when you were saying that, it reminded me of a moment. I was issued a minivan. So I was doing all
Oh
this minivan. I don't know if you've ever had to roll up and assert your authority in a minivan, but
well.
you start at a negative number, right? And
Sure.
I remember I was driving down. There was a really big rainstorm, and there were fires happening in shelters where my teams were, and I was trying to get them all done at the same time. And I pulled over, and was just texting solutions and calling, right? And my brain at that point, I'd done it for so many weeks that my brain, there was so few neurons firing, right? I was at a level of exhaustion. And I remember I hadn't solved anything yet, but I remember there was like 5 seconds where I looked up. You couldn't even see outside because of the heaviness of the rain. Recognized that it was that same rain that a few weeks ago had flooded Houston and all of southern Texas. And I just felt so happy, so peaceful. Like this, I wouldn't trade this moment for any other moment.
That is a
Not a
gift.
beautiful island, not Thanksgiving with family, just this is it. This is why. And that started a whole chain reaction that led me to come here.
That's incredible. It's amazing those moments that are so unexpected. They just light something up in you and you suddenly have an answer or at least the next step.
Yeah.
I believe the path isn't revealed to us all at once. It's I'm going to take this hit and this hit and this hit and eventually you're like, "Oh, I guess I'm in Denver now."
Yeah, yeah. Just being open to it, right? Since I think that was the last time that I got hit on the head with like purpose.
Yeah,
Hey,
wow.
how much longer are you going to be doing this when you realize what you need to be doing? And since then, like when I came home after that, I was living in DC. I did a lot of soul searching, and I said, okay, what I'm doing isn't getting me where I thought I would. I thought I was going the right direction, but I saw in these 83 days a Joseph that I hadn't seen before, and a Joseph that I'm proud of,
Mm.
a Joseph that helps people. How can I do that more? And so I put post-it notes, started with post-it notes of all the ideas, and then they filled one wall, then two walls, then three walls, then four walls. The entire walls were filled with post-it notes. And that's how I began this chapter of my life, right? Just from that moment in the rain.
And I find that it takes a lot of courage to course correct because you invest in a path, you get your education in order, spend time, many years at a job, and you build your way up the ladder. And to say, I'm going to just pull the plug on this, and I really feel that this is in fact where I need to be. It's a really hard thing to do, to jump. And it seems like you've done that several times in your journey. How do you know when it's time to go? Like, is there, I know like you get the ideas and post-its, but when you're like, no, it's it, I got to do it now.
Well, the idea to go happened before the post-its, right? It was like, I got
Mm.
something's wrong. I need to figure this out.
You knew that it was time to go, and then the inspiration started pouring in, and you were collecting information. How?
I had to dig deep in the cobwebs of all the dreams that I had had, right? Because so
Right.
it's sort of like to get to understand how I think. So for me, it isn't hard to jump. It's
Hmm.
harder to stay in something that isn't
Yes.
right, right? Because I know it's like you know when you're going the wrong way, you don't like it. There's anxiety. There's just you're not.
And your body reacts in a negative way.
Yes,
You get signs. Yeah.
and
Very
there's
clear.
triggers. There are habits that I see I start to do, and I'm like, huh, I remember that. Do you remember that year when that happened that year? And you start putting it together. But for me, it was understanding that one of my strengths, being in that disaster, in that hurricane, that disaster relief, was a lot of people's weaknesses in that same disaster relief. But survivors still needed help. So
Right.
with it, I can stay in policy and think, or I can go into where I'm strong at and where people need it right now. So it's not only a question of, for me, so it's not like, what's your purpose? Find it. It's like,
Hmm.
what's the problem? What's the purpose? It may be that it's my purpose, but am I actually strong at this? Right? If I walk into the situation and say, I can help, can I help? you
Yeah,
know,
you walk in and like, this guy needs brain surgery. I can help.
I could
I
do
mean, I
it.
don't know how to do it, but I can
It's my
help. You know,
purpose.
so
Yeah.
that's not how it really works. You find things that you're naturally gifted at and the things you enjoy, and you pair them with what area needs help. And it's funny you say that. An interview I did with a wonderful author, Tamma Keeves, she mentioned that she believes that every person on this earth is equipped to solve some problem that the world has, and we all have our own unique gifts. Like, I'm not going to go, into Antarctica and help with, helping the ice caps not melt. Like, that's not my zone of genius.
Yeah.
But I can have a conversation with you, and I can, bring your story out for people to be inspired by it. Like, that's one way I can participate. So it's
Yeah.
about finding that beautiful balance.
It is. It is. It's recognizing what you're strong at and what you're willing to wake up every day for. And you're exactly right. Right. There are a lot of people who do it the other way. They're like, I do want to be a brain surgeon. I've asked the universe. The universe has said yes. Here I go. And then you can start actually creating negative impact. Right. We should specify what kind of impact we want to have. Right.
That's a good point. Hopefully
But
it's positive.
hopefully it's positive. So I normally look at purpose first and then find the belief system that matches it. And I think a lot of people find the belief system first and then find
Mm.
that matches it. And I think because I have purpose first and then belief afterwards, that in sort of that story that gets me there, it allows me to jump much faster because I'm not beholden to something that needs to guide my entire life. It's guiding a purpose. And when the purpose changes, I need to reevaluate all the stories that I tell myself.
And that's the thing, like being self-reflective is something that's necessary, especially when you're going through different awakenings, when you're not the person you used to be, when everything around you has shifted, when you've expanded so much that you no longer fit in the same life. If you can't take a moment and look at yourself and evaluate where you've been, how you got there, where do you want to go, it's so easy to just kind of bypass that stuff and focus on goalposts and things. And I want this job, I want to live in this city, I want this, I want that, and not really digging deep and saying like, okay, but where does life want to take me? Where has everything, when I look back, all the dots seem like they don't connect, but they actually do. So I want to trust that the next dot is going to be just the right one for me.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how many people have different ways of making that a reality. Right? For me, it's asking myself, who do I want to be in 3 years? Not 10, not 20, not 30, not tomorrow. 3 years, and then going, how do I make that happen? And it's a hard question to ask, but once I have clarity on that, it is so easy to say no to things that just don't.
Yeah.
But you're right in that a lot of people substitute the hard questions for easier questions. It's easier to answer, what do I want to do, than who do I want to be, right? But the ease at the beginning, as we all know, right? Those of us who've been through struggle, right? It doesn't, the challenges come later, right? You're not avoiding
Yes.
challenges. The challenges become more complex because you don't have that North Star, right? That guides you and makes you realize what's worth it and what's not.
That's exactly right. And it's just like putting a band-aid on something because like you'll be good for a couple months. You'll have the shiny new toy, you'll have the exciting new space, but then deep down, like that's not actually solving the thing inside me that I need to release. That how am I going to show up in the world isn't going to be solved by like, well, I got a new job and it's a different place, so maybe I'll be a different me. It doesn't really work like that.
Oh,
And trust me, I've done that before, and I knew almost the second when I decided to do it, like, where you're going to be in 3 months, right? You're gonna be exactly where you were before, mentally, emotionally. But hey, if you want to give it a shot, go for it, and then you learn, and you move on, and
yeah.
you course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look back at all the dots in your life, and you can go into more detail if you want. Uh, is there like a thread? To me, I see a helping thread. I see a service thread. But like when you look back at really unrelated events, unrelated professions, what sticks out for you the most is like, yeah, that's like that is like the core of my experience.
So the core of my experience is who I am right now,
Mm,
like today. And if you ask me in 5 minutes, it's who I am in 5 minutes. Like what you're seeing is the computed equation where you
yeah.
the entire thing, blah 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 blah, all these events equals who I am right now. And so this is who I am. This is like I don't know if I'm answering the question. Um,
Yeah, I like it. It's like a different take on it. It's not like, okay, when I look back, all of these things are in common. And you don't have to find that thread necessarily. I mean, I guess I just pick up on themes like course correction. I mean, just not being afraid to move and getting the hit and going for it. And I feel like it has steered you right.
Resilience. So okay. So one thought that I think has been amazing, and it hit me a few weeks ago. Before I had purpose guiding me,
Mm-hmm.
I had adventure guiding me,
Mm,
and both of them were fueled by curiosity. So at first it was, but where I went was totally different, right? So like I sailed from South Africa to Brazil.
amazing.
I had never sailed before. Adventure, right?
Yes.
That's not a purpose-driven thought, right? At least it wasn't for me, but it was certainly an adventure-driven thought. And so that adventure, there was always a North Star, no matter what it was. It was either this is going to be the most amazing story ever, or this is going to be impact at scale, and all those purposes in between. So I think that one of the beauties of my life, if I can frame it that way, has been that I'm not living one life, but just chapters,
Yes.
individual purposes, and I'm going to do as much as I can. And if I fail, that's great. I'm going to be happy with the decisions I make at the time and accept the consequences. It's a largely much more pragmatic way of approaching life. Just going, you know what? I believe in this decision. Failure and success is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what comes of this great decision that I've just made.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great way to be. And it is a very present way to live. Um, I'm inspired by it for sure. So I want to hear about your work and your company that you've created and talk a little bit about that and how if people would be interested in, getting to work with you, getting to know more about you, how they can do that.
So I just moved to Denver, and I would like the impact that I scale to happen right here at Denver. No more clients abroad. I want to make the front range. I want to plug into the front range. So there's two ways of doing that. One is collaborating, right? There's just so many areas that we can make the solutions bigger, and we can make the impact brighter, both in the individual level, at the business level, and at the government level. And so I want to plug in all my experience to making Denver in the Front Range a brighter place, like turning those bright minds with great ideas into real realities. And then in the trenches, my company helps businesses through crisis, well, organizations through crisis. So small businesses, startups, nonprofits. Mm-hmm. The idea is, how do we create impact by building organizations that can handle all the uncertainties that come with business? And how can they both be structured so that they satisfy the demands of the investors, the donors, or the business mission, while still serving the customers and serving the people in need? So I help with systemizing. I help with building a business that can handle growth. So most people choose to focus on bringing people into the door, clients, but few focus on what happens when they get there. That's what I help leaders focus on.
Ah, I see.
So I turn owners into leaders by helping them systemize, helping them simplify their mission so that they're only working towards their mission and not all these other shiny objects, and hiring a team. That way the owner can become a leader, and the leader can guide the business or the organization to where it needs to be.
Is it similar to when you were working in Houston, that they don't need to know your name, they just need the tools, and that they can go and make that impact?
Yeah, I don't need a street. I don't need a street. I don't need a street. I am so satisfied with the way my life has been, right? Even if the rest of my life is just failure after failure, this smile isn't going anywhere, and I really mean that. So right now, what I'm looking for is helping build institutions that survive me. And that helps a community grow.
Well, I highly doubt you'll have failure after failure after failure, although we all have some degree of ups and downs in our lives. That's just part of the learning process. Yeah. But it sounds like your trajectory, you're in the right place, your heart's in the right place, and you're making great global and local impact. So it's been wonderful chatting with you, Joseph. And I'm just so delighted that you were able to share some of your story.
I appreciate it. You're a great host, and I admire all the things that you're doing as well. And so I look forward to where we all go in the future, and what this conversation brings.
I appreciate that. Thank you. No doubt you'll be inspiring people all over the world. Can't wait till they hear this conversation. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.